It begins as a simple transaction, a piece of mass-produced vinyl brought into a private home. Within days, the purchase is linked to a sequence of events that results in the total erasure of a life. The buyer was Melon, a young woman who worked long shifts to support her family. Following the death of her father, she became the sole provider for her mother and sister, dedicating her life to ensuring their financial stability. To maximize her earning potential, she had relocated from a rural village to the high-density economic center of Shanghai. Melon found employment at a high-end toy store specializing in designer collectibles. It was a role that allowed her to turn a lifelong affection for dolls into a professional focus. When a limited edition shipment of Labubu figures arrived, the stock vanished almost instantly. Melon secured a rare golden variant for herself, a figure defined by its oversized serrated teeth and a frozen, wide-eyed expression. Melon's excitement was met with immediate resistance from her dog, Bao. The moment the figure was brought into the apartment, the animal's temperament changed, alternating between desperate barking and low, territorial growls directed at the toy. Attributing the dog's behavior to nerves, Melon placed the golden doll on a high display shelf and went to bed. The apartment grew quiet as she slept. On the shelf, the figure remained exactly where she had left it, a new, silent presence in the corner of her room. By the morning of the second day, the dog's distress had only intensified. To keep the peace before her shift, Melon locked Bao in the bathroom and left the apartment. That afternoon, Melon's colleagues observed a sudden shift in her behavior. A woman known for her patience with customers became inexplicably volatile, ending her shift with a public outburst of unprovoked anger. The incident resulted in her immediate termination. Within hours, the financial security she had built for her family in the village was gone. Night fell on day 2. Melin, exhausted and distressed, was awakened in the dark by a sound that didn't belong in the apartment. The dry, high-pitched echo of laughter coming from the shadows of the bedroom. She drifted into a state between sleep and waking, where she saw a figure with rotting red skin and needle-thin claws leaning over her, its weight pressing down on her chest. Melin bolted upright, her heart racing. The room was empty of intruders, but the golden Labubu doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting on her mattress, staring directly at her. Bao burst into the room, lunging at the doll. In a frenzy of protective instinct, the dog tore the vinyl figure apart, scattering pieces of golden plastic across the floor until the object was unrecognizable. Melin sat in the wreckage of the toy, shaken but relieved. She was unemployed and alone in the dark, but the source of the night's tension appeared to be physically destroyed. On the morning of day 3, Melin woke to a throbbing headache. When she checked the mirror, she found her skin marked by clusters of small red welts that resembled the puncture marks of a bite. The apartment was unusually still. She called out for her dog, but Bao didn't respond. She stepped into the bathroom to wash her face. As she leaned over the sink, she caught a glimpse in the glass. The red-skinned figure from her nightmare was standing inches behind her reflection. When she turned, the space was empty. The golden doll sat on the counter, perfectly intact and free of any damage from the previous night. The doll's expression had shifted. The wide, manufactured smile had deepened, looking less like a toy and more like a predator baring its teeth. A dark stain began to seep out from under the kitchen sink. When Melon opened the door, she found Bao's body. The dog had been violently mutilated. She looked back at the restored doll on the counter. The gold vinyl on its hands and teeth was now coated in fresh blood. The dog that had shredded the doll was dead. The doll that had been shredded was now standing over the remains, displaying its new, jagged grin. Distraught, Melon began searching for any mention of similar incidents. She found forums filled with accounts of other Labubu owners who had experienced sudden illness, job loss, and unexplainable violence shortly after buying the figure. These reports weren't limited to Shanghai. In several regions, local groups were documenting a rise in paranormal reports, leading to community-driven bans on the dolls. Within these online circles, some users began comparing the doll's specific facial features, the ears, the teeth, and the eyes, to archaeological sketches of ancient deities. They pointed to Pazuzu, a Mesopotamian entity known in historical texts as a bringer of storms and sickness. To the people sharing these stories, the doll was a modern vessel for a very old threat. In a final act of desperation, Mellon burned the figure and threw its ashes into a nearby river, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the object. On day 4, authorities were called to the apartment. They found Mellon's body inside. Beside her lay the golden doll. Despite Mellon's attempts to burn and drown it, the figure sat on the floorboards, completely unmarked and still smiling. A coworker who helped clear the apartment noticed the doll on the floor. Unaware of the events of the previous 3 days, she thought it was a rare find, too valuable to be thrown away, and placed it in her bag. The coworker walked home, carrying the golden figure through her own front door. The rare doll was back on a shelf, ready for the first night in a new home.